when I first started creating my business, my video business, I was basically doing a transition from going from a freelancer to basically having my own company. But all I really did was became a glorified freelancer. And the big problem and the thing that was holding me back then was I just had such a hard time trusting people. So when it came to shooting, directing, editing, whatever it was, the first year, the first couple of years of creating a company, I really thought I would do a better job than anybody else I would hire. And I was basically trying to do everything myself. I was just not willing to let go of anything. And the only people I would really hire or even depend on would be sort of on the client management side or things like animation, where I just didn't even know how to do that. So I was forced to hire someone to do that. But when it came to things that I know how to do, directing, shooting, editing, I would try to do as much as possible myself. Sometimes even the entire project, I would do every single step. And this is, again, long time of being a freelancer, and I had my own production company, but that wasn't really a company, right? It was just me freelancing with some few more resources. Now, a lot of the small production companies I talked to, they all had basically the same exact problem. The owner or multiple owners, they didn't want to hire basically any help on the creative side. They just wanted to do every single job, and they wanted to do every aspect of every single job. And they were all convinced if they stopped doing it, this includes me, that everything would fall apart, that we would basically lose control, we would lose the client, we will make less money, all the things that you think of when you think of letting go any control on any creative project. And this is pretty much true with any small business. And in some cases where I knew for sure another director, another DP would do a better job than me, I still would hire myself into the job. And I thought, well, I'm saving money on hiring someone else. I should just do it if I don't need to hire someone else, right? Why don't I just do it myself? And even though for the first couple of years, this was a huge upgrade from my freelance life as far as how many jobs we took on, really because I learned the side that really brought me clients, which was marketing, I still fell flat after a couple of years. We couldn't figure out how to make more money. And I realized I hit the cap. This is as much work as I could do and my producer could do on our own, right? There was no other way to grow really, because we just didn't have more hours in the day. And as long as we kept doing all of it ourselves, and a lot of it myself, we knew we just couldn't grow. And at this point, I honestly felt like sort of like a prisoner, but I kind of created that own prison for myself, right? I had to let go of some control in order to grow. I had to rely on other people. So when I was searching for answers, I came across this book. I read a bunch of books on the topic, but the E-Myth Revisited was the book that most changed how I looked at this whole situation. And I highly recommend you read this. It's really well written, and it's also really easy to consume if you like Audible. So I just recently listened to the audio format about a week ago or so I could have a refresher for this video. But I want to cover 3 big takeaways I had here. And again, this is one of probably the top 5 books that really kind of changed the trajectory of my career and really helped me create sort of the life I really wanted, and not the one that I had designed by accident that was kind of keeping me prisoner to what I thought was a real business, but it really was holding me back more like a glorified freelancer. And basically, it turned out that a lot of small businesses of all kinds had these exact same problems. But before reading this book, I kind of felt alone. I didn't realize a lot of people are going through exactly the same thing. And it had a lot to do with letting go of control, letting other people do parts of or all the jobs for you. Rather than being an employee of your own company, you become a business owner. It really is that transition. The first point of the book is most people go into business because they think they know how to do the job of the business. They understand the technical work of the business. So I was freelancing, I was shooting videos, I was editing videos. So I thought if I had my own production company, I would know exactly how that works because I've seen that work, I know that work, and I could technically do that work. And it turns out that's actually the root cause of why these businesses sort of don't become a real business and kind of become this prison that you create for yourself, because creating a business is not just about the technical work of the business. That part I did not understand. So he made a lot of examples. For example, a plumber would go into a plumbing business. But what's interesting is an example is if a technician that is not a plumber starts a plumbing business, they will probably do a lot better. Let's say an electrician does a plumbing business, they would actually be further ahead because they would have to outsource every job and they would work on the business, not in the business. I think actually that same quote came from this book back in the day. The second point is really interesting. Heath says that there is really 3 different people inside of every single person, right? So there's the entrepreneur, that's the person that decided, hey, I'm going to create a business. There's the manager, and there's the technician. Now the problem is, this is not at all balanced for most of us. In fact, it's more like 70 to 80% the technician at the wheel. And this is basically where the main problem comes into play. Because without the manager and without the entrepreneur, and he breaks down the role of every single person, all those 3 people that are inside of every person that starts a business, it basically creates this internal war. Those people don't get along. Entrepreneur wants entirely something else than what the technician wants, right? Technician is, like most of us, we probably think like, hey, if you want it done right, you should do it yourself. That keeps you a technician. That takes you away from being a business owner. And the little part that you have left, you just allocate to the manager, right? So to manage the clients and things like that. But the entrepreneur, the one that should really be driving the wheel, doesn't really move the business along. Again, you end up working in the business and not on the business, which again is this whole dilemma of those 3 different people that are in that internal war. And it carries to your personal life. It's so hard to actually stop thinking about it and to turn it off. You just constantly have this war within your own brain. And the ultimate goal here is when you create any type of business, especially this video production business that's more creative, you want to create a balance in your life, right? You want to keep your business as a real business that is not just this freelance prison that you're creating for yourself. And this business shouldn't rely 100% on you. Right now, we have 3 different projects I'm not involved with. We have 2 I am involved with because I chose to be, right? You need to create a business where 100% of it is not sitting on your shoulders because of some of the things I'm going to cover here that I read from this book here. So the business where you don't need to be there all the time, the business where the technician is not at the wheel all the time. And as long as the technician is at the wheel, the entrepreneur and manager can't thrive. So this is one of the biggest things that I took away from this book was this mindset of thinking about myself as 3 different people and trying to take away time from the technician by basically outsourcing some of the work the technician side of me was doing, like directing, shooting, editing, and then let the manager and the entrepreneur actually thrive in their roles too within my own brain. And then he talked about the 3 different stages from infancy to maturity of a business and how it evolves. And the infancy really talked to me the most, especially when I first read this book, because most people in the world of photography, videography, filmmaking, they're stuck in the infancy stage forever. They never get out of infancy stage. And that's basically where we are a glorified freelancer, right? You work for yourself, you technically have your own company, but you're doing all the work, right? You're the technician, and you also have to learn a bunch of random things that the technician didn't know, right? So when you were just freelancing, let's say you were freelancing, you work for a different company, you just knew what the technical work was. But now in this infancy stage, you have to know a bunch of other stuff like a little bit of marketing, a little bit of sales, a little bit of bookkeeping to just keep the business afloat, right? So sometimes this makes your life even more difficult. So now you're a glorified technician and you're stuck in this infancy stage and you never get out of it. So you basically dedicate all your energy and time to basically keep the business afloat. And the whole point here of creating a business was so we could expand beyond ourselves, so we could have a little bit more freedom here. So we're not kind of a prisoner. Because if we walk away in this infancy stage from the business, even for a week, things usually fall apart. Again, this keeps you a prisoner to your own business. So the goal here, or the solution, is to delegate slowly the things that the technician side of you is doing. So if you're editing, outsourcing some of that. If you're shooting, outsourcing some of that. If you're doing a lot of the pre-production things like writing, outsourcing that. And I really heavily relied on freelancers because I just didn't want to have a big overhead. I've explained this in some of my other videos where I saw other companies with huge overheads really fall apart and it ruined those owners' lives. So that really kept me small in the beginning of thinking I should rely on freelancers, which ended up working just fine. But I still took time away from the technician side of me and started focusing on the business side giving time to the manager and the entrepreneur. Now, once you change your mindset, because the first thing and the second point of the book that I really took away was all about mindset of thinking about yourself differently, thinking about those 3 different people within yourself, allocating more time for those other 2, right, to take over the technician's majority ownership of the business. And then once you get there, you need to create a system. Now, he really dove deep in how you would create a system, and he used things like McDonald's, how McDonald's could have a system so dialed in that anybody, minimum wage worker could come in and it would work and it would be the same in every store. But I think in the technical world is a little bit more difficult, but you still could have a system that you don't need the best people in the world to basically come in and run, right? You want to have a system for basically acquiring clients. A lot of the things I teach to my students is exactly that. Once you have a client, what's the system of fulfillment? Is there a step-by-step? Even though every single video we typically create is very customizable, right? It's very unique to that person or to that client. You still try to figure out a system. Well, all the steps are typically the same. I have basically a 20-step process from pre-production all the way to fulfillment of a project that we could make sure every single person is hitting the things that they have to do. And again, I rely on freelancers, and you could rely on a combination of freelancers and employees to take care of a lot of that for you. Those are some of the biggest takeaways. But again, this book is full of different takeaways. And I highly recommend. It's one of the top 5 books that I would recommend anyone in the world of entrepreneurship and anyone that wants to basically transition from being a freelancer or an employee to running their own business read. I wish I read it before I got stuck and looked for a solution. So if I had read it before, maybe some of these things would have been a little bit easier for me to kind of delegate, and it wouldn't have held me back for the first couple of years. So I hope you found this video useful, and I'll catch you next time.